Good evening, everybody, and I'd like to welcome you to the first Let's Talk Organics webinar for Teagasc 2023. I suppose since the last time we joined you was in October, we've seen a huge influx of new people, of new farms and farmers into the organic farming scheme, with over 2,000 farmers entering the scheme, which is nearly a doubling of the land area in the last number of years, up to nearly 4%. So when we came together to decide what we were going to talk about, as a livestock farmer, one of the areas that people have to look at is the whole area of animal housing. And when we look at animal housing, you have to look at the areas such as space requirements for the animals and the type of housing that you have. So that's what we decided to be our first topic, is the whole area of animal housing. We can't go out to a farmyard this evening, so what we're going to do is going to bring two farmyards to yourselves. What we're going to do, we have two farmers. We have Tadhg Claire Halpin from Tulla in County Clare, whose farm is one of the over 2,000 farms that have entered organics. And then we have Fergus Hanly from Mesquite in Limerick, who is over a decade farming organically. So we're going to see the two profiles, somebody just going in and then somebody that has been there for a long number of years. So without further ado, before I say go ahead, is make sure you use we're joined by both Claire, Tadhg and Fergus, and just as the videos are going on, if you think of a question, please use the chat function and we'll go through the questions at the end. Also, between the two videos, I'll be joined by my colleague Joe Kelleher, and Joe will give an overview of the practical implications in relation to changing your animal housing, all about space requirements, bedding materials, etc., what you can and cannot do, and the kind of various options also. So with that, I'm going to ask Martin to play our first video of Tadhg and Claire Halpin in Tulla, County Clare, who have just recently joined the organics.
On December 9th, 2022, the Organic Farming Scheme closed for applications. Over 2,000 new farmers applied to join the scheme, and today we're on one of those farms. We're on the farm of Tadhg and Claire Halpin here today in County Clare. So, Tadhg, can you tell us why did you join the Organic Farming Scheme? What was your motivations?
Well, the farm is here at Toonagh, Tulla, County Clare, and I joined the organic scheme before the scheme closed on the 9th of December. And I was always interested in the organic scheme, and my local Teagasc advisor, Conor O'Reilly, was with me in June or July doing a reap inspection, and we got chatting about it, and he said basically that I was nearly organic as I was, bar just to cut back a little bit and cut out the fertilizer and feed and stuff, and we got talking then, and he went through all the advantages and disadvantages, and one of the main advantages was the increase in income, and basically it's better for the environment, and I wanted to cut back a little bit on work and stuff, and it all kind of came together. So that's basically the reason.
So Claire, can you describe your farming system to us?
Yeah, so we farm about 70 hectares on our farm, and we've about 20 suckler cows, and then the rest are cows which will be reared and fattening for beef. And then we bring in about 20 weanlings each year. We've about 100 beef cattle on our farm now today.
Tadhg, can you go through your current housing system on the farm, and what way do you house the cattle currently on the farm?
Yeah, all the suckler cows are outwintered, and all the year and a half cattle and weanlings are all housed in slats.
And to comply with the organic farming scheme, you'll have to have your houses modified by next winter. What do you intend doing to your housing to meet the organic standards?
Well, in this shed here, I have to build a dry layout the back, and in the 3-bay double in the other yard, they can be modified onto another shed.
Okay. And you've plenty of space in the other yard to meet the organic requirements?
I have plenty of space in the other yard, yeah. It's just the walls and stuff have to be modified to allow the cattle to get into the other shed and lie back.
And you intend to do most of this work this summer coming, is it?
This summer, yeah, I've some prices even got already.
Okay, good. So how many cattle are in this shed, Tadhg, and what exactly do you plan doing to convert it?
There's 35 year-and-a-half cattle here at the moment, and my plan is to build back a dry shed 25 foot in width, which probably is a bit too much, but I'd rather to have a bit more space than when I just want to do it once and have the extra bit of space on it. And I plan to knock out 2 gates on the back wall to allow the cattle to go back and their dry lie back, and to kind of graft the pillars of the new shed onto the back of the existing shed.
So Claire, we're in the second shed here in the farm, so can you just describe to us the layout of the shed and what type of animal is typically housed in the shed?
Yeah, so we have 3 bays of slats on this side, and then we have another 3 bays of slats on the other side. And then this shed will mostly be used for weanlings, but just on this pin here we've 3 cows that are out for winterage. Their calves will be weaned in a few weeks, so these calves then will stay in the shed, and then the cows will be put out. All our 20 suckler cows are put out on a good dry sheltered site.
So how you want to, we said there's 2 halves to this shed, Tadhg. So this half over here, how are you going to convert this half over here?
Yeah, I have an original cubicle shed here at the end of this three bay of slats. So basically I will be knocking a gate out into the cubicle shed, and the cattle can go the whole way up when they have eaten, and they can lie down on the dry lie up in the cubicle shed.
Okay. And this side of it then we have 3 slatted pins with very little concrete area in it. So what's the plan for this shed?
The plan for this shed is then that I have a big shed, dry shed out here, and I will be knocking a gate here and at the end of the new shed, and the cattle come down here and they eat, and then they go back up into the dry lie, and they'll have a dry lie up there.
So this wall here would say you're going to knock a gap in that as well.
Knock a gap in that, and knock a gap on the back wall and onto the new shed then.
Okay, so the cattle on this will have free access to these 3 pens, and then
straight
access out here to lie down.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the dry shed near the 3 bay double. So my plan is to put an opening here on this wall, and this will link out into the 3 bay row of slats. And my plan is then to basically next winter, we'll say all that hay will be gone at this side, and there will be 3 dry bed pens up along here, which basically it'll be all in one pen, we'll say. And when the cattle eat down in the slats, basically they'll have access to come back up here and lie down.
Okay, so there you have Tadhg and Claire Halpin and telling their story. And as I said, we have Tadhg here, and he'll be answering any questions that you have. So keep putting your questions into the question and answer function. Now I'm just going to hand you over to Joe, and Joe is going to give an overview on converting beef housing and what you have to think about when complying with organic standards. So he's going to give us a lot about space requirements, bedding materials. So over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Elaine. So as Elaine said, I'm just going to go through the basics of what is required to comply with the organic standards. I suppose every farmyard you go into is different, and there's no 2 farmyards the same, so it's very hard maybe to give a one-size-fits-all advice when it comes to housing. It's very much you have to see what's on the yard in terms of existing housing and modify it then maybe based on what's on the yard. But hopefully this will give people an overview of the way to approach the housing conversion issue when you join organics. So to start with, I suppose the first point that should be made, and you saw that from Tadhg and Claire's video, is that housing is not mandatory. You are permitted to outwinter as long as you meet the Department of Agriculture's cross-compliance terms and conditions, which is basically that you can outwinter at 1 livestock unit per hectare. The cattle can't be poaching. If there's round feeders, they have to be moved. So it's the same conditions as you have for cross-compliance. And look, common sense probably comes into it. It'll work where you've good free draining soil. But if you're on a heavy clay type soil in high rainfall area, outwintering is probably not a practical solution. So for some parts of the country, yes, it can be used, but for other parts, we really are looking at housing for the most part. So that's just to state that first of all. So I suppose it can be simple enough in one way when you look at housing and how you approach it. So the first thing you need to do is to measure your shed. So you have to get out the measuring tape and you have to actually measure the shed. And the two things you want to measure is how much slatted area have you in your sheds and how much solid line area have you. So if you can get those two figures written down on a sheet of paper, you're a lot of the way towards figuring out how many cattle you can hold in your shed, and maybe if the shed is too small, what you need to build to accommodate the cattle that you want. So if we take a typical slatted shed with a lie-back area here, and we look at it, and let's say for argument's sake that it's 5 metre wide and 4 metre deep of a solid line area, well then straight away we know 20 metres squared of a lying area, and if we have another 4 metres of a slatted area at the front of that bin, we have another 20 metres of slatted area. So there's 40 metres squared inside of that bin. It's very basic, simple sum, and that's our starting point. So this table then is the next key thing that everyone needs to really get their head around if they want to figure out what space they need for the various types of animal. So there's a couple of things that we need to look at on this table. So I suppose the first thing is this heading at the top. So what's on this table, this is the total indoor area available to the animals. So this is a combination of slatted and solid lying area in the shed. So it's the total area that each animal needs within a shed in an organic system. So if you have calves up to 100 kilos, they need 1.5 meters squared each. If they're up to 200, they need 2.5. If they're up to 350, they'll need 4 meters squared. And if they're over 350, they'll need 5 meters squared with a minimum of 1 meter squared per 100 kilo. And that's quite a useful guide if you want. While it's not going to be exact, it's a good rule of thumb to use, just 1 meter squared per 100 kilos if you're doing rough sums, and it'll get you a lot of the way there. Dairy cows or suckler cows then also need 6 meters squared. So they're the key figures. So if you have a measuring tape and you have this table, you can figure out most of what you need when it comes to figuring out the amount of space that the animals on your shed require. There's one other key line then that comes into the organic standards, and it's this line that states that at least half of the minimum surface of the indoor area for bovine animals shall consist of a solid construction. That is to say, not of a slatted or grid construction, and that's direct from the organic standards. So that means, yes, cattle can walk on slats, they go onto slats to feed, but they have to have access to a lying area, and the lying area has to tie in with the figures that are on this table up here. So if we go back to this shed again, we had 20 meters squared of straw area, the solid line area, and with 20 meters squared of slats. And if they're 500 kilo bullocks, then we're saying they need 5 meters squared each, so we can house 8 of those type animals in a pen like that. So that's the very basic of how you would go approaching it. So what I've done here is I've just taken Tadhg and Claire there, you saw the video, and just how we would approach it if we were going out to Tadhg and Claire's farmyard to assess the housing that was there. So first thing is you need to figure out how many animals do they intend housing over the winter. And in this case, you saw that there was 20 suckler cows, which are outwintered, and then there's 40 0 to 1-year-olds and 40 1 to 2-year-olds going to be housed. So that's the starting point to figure out where you go. The next step then is you have to figure out what weight roughly these animals are going to be. So if we say that the 0 to 1-year-olds, they're typically March or April born sucklers, so let's say they're 300 kilos on average, and your 1.5-year-olds they're going into the shed are 500 kilos. And if your suckler cow then we'll say 650 kilos each. So what's based today? So we have to go back to our table that we had in the previous slide. So you'll see that the 0 to 1-year-olds they need 4 meters squared per animal, which is tiny in here because they're 300 kilos. So in this table here, they're up to 350, so they need 4. Your 1 to 2-year-olds are 500 kilo, so they're in here. They need 5 meters squared each. And your cows, if they were to be housed, would need 6 meters squared. So and often you find these are the 3 figures that you need on a lot of suckling farms in particular is 4, 5, and 6. You need 4 meters squared for your weanlings, you need 5 meters squared for your 1.5-year-olds, and you need 6 meters squared for your suckler cows. So it's a simple enough rule of thumb, the 4, 5, and 6 rule. So the total space then, in this case, if we multiply the numbers across, the cows are out winter, so they're not applicable. So we need 360 meters squared of space within all the sheds on Tadhg Claire's farm. And of that, half it must be lying area, so 180 meters squared must be lying. So if we look at, and you saw in the video again there, if we look at the sheds and we look at what's there, so this was what I'm calling shed 1. So this was the slatted shed above on its own that Tadhg detailed how he's going to build a straw bedded area out the back. And when that straw bedded area is built out the back, this is what Tadhg and Claire will have. They'll have 75 meters squared of slats, and there's going to be 142 meters squared of a lying area out the back, giving a total area of 217 meters squared. Shed number 2 then was in the other yard, and that's this shed. And I have called it the right-hand side and the left-hand side. So you had a central feed passage. So if we call this the right-hand side and this the left-hand side, you will see that the right-hand side had 77 square meters of slatted area and only 25. So it's a bit lopsided. So that side of the shed would be slightly understocked, but it has a floor area of 102. And then the left-hand side had the 56 square meters, and when the wall was going to be knocked through to join up with the other shed, there was going to be an additional 64 meters squared of lying area, given a total area in the sheds of 439. So with 439 total area, and of which 231 is lying area. And if we go back to the first shed, we needed just 180 and 360. So we're meeting what's required. So I don't throw a lot of numbers out there, but that's just to give you an idea how this exercise should be done, how you'd actually go through it and work it out in a practical case. So the measuring tape is the most important tool here, and just an idea or an estimate of the number of cattle that are going to be kept in the sheds over the winter. Just touching on, I know with the title of this is converted beef housing, but it's the exact same principles for sheep housing or goat housing. So just the square meters for sheep or goats is 1.5 meters squared per ewe or ram, and 0.35 per lamb or kid. So if anyone is interested in converting sheep housing, exact same exercise, but these are the figures you'll be using. So then, just on if you notice, the wording that we've been using is solid floor lying area, and that can be one of two things really. So it can be a straw bedded area, which is the most common, or it equally can be a cubicle bed. And so for our organic dairy farmers, the picture on the right would probably be the more common one, and for the beef farmers, the picture on the left would be the more typical. So both are allowable. I suppose with the cubicles, though, there are a number of conditions that are attached to it. So for a cubicle bed, and in areas where maybe there might be a tradition of dairying and there's a lot of farmer dairy farmers, there could be a lot of cubicle houses, and this might be relevant as well. But cubicles must be 3 meters squared for a dairy cow or a suckler cow, because they have to have they need 6 meters squared, and half it has to be lying. So that's your cubicle. So they have to have 3 meters squared each of lying area. Now, the minimum size for a cubicle is 2.62. So that's typically a 7.5 foot cubicle by 3 foot 10 or 11. So it's still a big cubicle. So a lot of the older style cubicle houses would struggle to meet that. So you will, in a lot of cases, have to modify the size of the cubicles to meet that. So for example, the cubicle has to be this, but you need this. So in practical examples, it might mean putting 70 cows into an 80 cow cubicle house to meet those two figures. Concrete based cubicles are allowed. So that's a cubicle bed without a rubber mat, provided they are fitted with deep layered bedding. So the picture here on the top right is a concrete cubicle bed, and the farmer in this question has put straw on the cubicle beds, which some people will say is not practical, which is fine, but some people will make it work, which is equally fine. If you don't want to straw bed it, then this R comes in. So the R is our other cushioned bedding materials, which is your mat, that's your cubicle mat. And there must also be an additional layer of bedding or litter material on top. So typically what the dairy farmers, organic dairy farmers would use there would be an untreated sawdust mixed with cubicle lime as the bedding material on top. So it's just an important point to note for people that might have cubicles, that they can be made to work in certain situations. It might mean modifying cubicle sizes. Moving on to the bedding materials then, there's a number of bedding materials that are permitted. So straw is the most common one, obviously, but equally rushes, where on areas of the country where rushes are fairly prominent, and you can cut them and wilt them and bale them up. They're perfectly acceptable as a bedding material. And wood chip, I suppose, is the other one that is allowed. The one that is not allowed is the peat bedding. It's not permitted within the organic standards. Sawdust or shavings are permitted, but they must be untreated. So there are options there. If you're in a tillage part of the country and you can get straw fairly at good value, then that's probably the best option. But maybe if you're further away from tillage areas, then rushes could very well be a very viable option. The amount of straw, and Fergus's video is coming up next, and he gives a great, I think, run through on the amount of straw he uses, and it'll give people a good idea. But just there's a number of factors determine the amount of straw, and it's very hard to give the amount of bales, but I think Fergus covers it well in his video. But the stocking rate of a shed is one of the key. The more animals you have in a shed, the more straw you're going to need. Even you'll see in Fergal's example there that he's understocking the shed, and as a result, his amount of straw he's using is lower. Where you have a separate feeding area to the lying area. So in some cases, we'll have farmers with no slatted area, and the cattle are standing on the straw eating. You're doing a lot more changing and bedding in that situation than where they can go onto slats to eat and back onto a straw area to lie down. Minimizing the amount of traffic across the lying area is important. Cleaning out the shed regularly versus allowing the straw to accumulate, both are acceptable in organics, but if you clean it out regularly, you will find that your straw will last just that bit longer. And the other fairly obvious one, I suppose, is the positioning of the water truck. Just don't put it at the back of the shed where if it does leak, it wets the bed, or where the cattle have to go across the straw bedded area to access it. So just a few simple points on the amount of straw that's likely to be used. This is probably the common questions we get, I suppose, really is on this one. So look, the first one on top left here, we're constantly asked, can you use slat mats instead of straw bedding? And the answer is no. It's a European ruling, and it doesn't look like it's going to be changed. So slat mats are not permitted under organics. You have to have a solid floor lying area. The other question we get asked a lot is, can I put cubicle mats on top of slats? And again, the answer there is no, they won't, that's not permitted. So it is a solid floor lying area. So if you have slats, you have to look at modifying in some shape or form. This picture here might be a bit confusing, but what I'm trying to show here is straw on slats. Again, we're asked, can you put straw on slats? No is the answer. So slat mats, rubber mats, or straw on slats are not permitted, unfortunately. What is allowed here then is if you take up the slats and replace them with slabs, that is permitted, and that is eligible for TAMS grant aid. Well, we're hoping it will be the same as it was in the previous scheme when TAMS does come out. Organic farmers are eligible for 60% grant aid. So you could take up row slats, or if you have a 4-bay shed, take up the slats and 2 of the bays, and then you have 50% lying area and 50% slatted area. So that's one option for some farmers, and it might be a relatively inexpensive option compared to some other options. The other option here, look, is this farmer here has converted the central feed passage into straw bedded area. So we do see farmers doing that a lot in organics. They will bed the central feed passage, and then they'll try put the feed barriers on the outside of the shed. So it might mean knocking a few external walls, but it is another way of getting some lying area. So it's about being creative, I suppose, is what that picture is about. And sometimes it's about looking at the sheds that are in your yard. Can you repurpose existing sheds? Is there machinery sheds there that could be used that they can go onto the slats to eat, but you can give them access to a shed across the yard to go in and lie down. The wording in the organic standards is cattle must have free access to a solid bed lying area. So if it's 10 meters across the yard, the lying areas from the feeding, that's fine, as long as the cattle have free access between the two sheds. You also have to be cognizant of nitrates rules, that if there is any material on that area between the two sheds, you have to be able to collect that as well. So then, just looking again, and this is probably tying in with Fergus or with Tadhg Claire's shed. So if we take a simple 4-bay slatted shed here, which we'd see up and down the country, no lying area, just the bare slats. See, there's a few feet of concrete at the front, but that's it. It's purely slatted shed. So what do we do in this situation? So as I say, it's very similar to Tadhg Claire's. It's equally quite similar to what Fergus is going to show you. So the option here, one of the options here is to build out the back as Fergus or Tadhg outlined in the first video. And this is very similar to what Tadhg is proposing. So a 7.5 meter deep shed, your 8x4 RSJ here under plans will span 7.5 meters, 7.6 meters actually. So you're getting the best use out of your 8x4 RSJ. If the pillars on the shed here are strong enough, you can graft onto it. And then you've only the one line of new pillars on the back wall. A few key things, just ventilation. Again, you'll see that very well on Fergus's shed. Just get plenty of air in here and get plenty of air out here to keep the airflow moving through the shed, because you are blocking the airflow that was coming in here. So you want to improve the ventilation rather than disimproving it. A good fall on the floor, and in some cases we would see that the straw bedded area here would actually be sunken. You might sink it 300 mils below the slatted area. And it stops the straw then in this area being pulled onto the slats. The disadvantage of that is you lose a foot of storage space out of your slats because the inlet pipe is coming down a foot from the top. So, but it is something that to be considered. The other few design features then is because you've put in this layer, you've actually fairly well increased the number of cattle that you can house in that shed. So, for example, in this shed here, you would fit 55 weanlings in that shed as drawn there. But you've only 4 feed barriers, and weanlings you'll probably get 8 or 9 of them, probably 8 per barrier feeding. So that's only 32 of them able to feed at one time. So you could look at putting barriers along the side of one of the sides of the shed, as is shown here, as a way of getting extra feed space. And then you're getting in here to the back to either scrape this area but also to clean out the straw bedded if you need it. So it's about just looking at those few features as well. So you're all saying that's fine, but what's this going to cost? And I suppose this is, and unfortunately these prices have taken a big leap over the last number of years. So based on last year's prices, and they seem to have kind of flattened out a bit since last year, you're looking at somewhere around 41,000 for that, and that's excluding VAT. Is the cost of that shed. Now the department's costings unfortunately haven't kept pace with the price of buildings, and the department's value under TAMS is 21 or almost 22,000 for that shed. So it's just slightly over half. So the costings are a nice bit off of actual costs. So, and all organic farmers then next year or this year coming will be entitled to a 60% grant, which in that situation you'll get 60% of the 21,680 there. So the grant is worth 13,000. So the net cost to the farmer for what you see in that picture there, assuming the slatted shed is existing and we're building this green roof shed on the back, is 27,000 is the cost. Now it might seem like a big investment, but if you take someone like Tadhg that has the 70 hectares, I know not everyone has the 70 hectares, but Tadhg and Claire, their organic payment will be coming close to 20,000 per year on average for 5 years. So, 27,000 in that situation is not such a bad investment when you think of the return that they're going to get back. And that there then is just the number of cattle that could be housed in that shed. So again, it's back to our 4, 5 and 6 here. So with 4 meters squared for the weanlings, we can put 55 in there. With 5 meters squared for the finishing animals at 500 kilos, 44 of them in this shed. And if it was housing suckler cows, we put 37 of them into that shed. So it is a decent sized shed, and it's a nice result. And you'll see the finished example of that shed in the next video. Going slightly off topic, but I suppose if anyone wants to find out more about farm buildings, we're running a series of 25-hour courses at the moment. We're starting a number of them around the country next week. Actually, the first one is starting this Friday. There is places available, and if people want to find out more about farm buildings or any other aspects of organic farming, it's now would be a good time to sign up. And anyone that signs up between here and Friday, it's a good chance they will get a place on one of these courses. So you see there, if you just put Teagasc Organic Training into your search engine, it'll take you to this page. There's an email address there, organiccourse@teagasc.ie. If you email your name, your address, your phone number, you will be offered a place on that course. So that's just a final point. So I'll hand you back to Elaine.
Okay, Joe, thank you very much. Definitely, we need to get the measuring tape out. That's definitely a a starter when considering converting your housing. And I'd also tell you to keep putting the questions into the question and answer function, and we'll try to get to them all afterwards. Now, we're going back out to the farmyard and we're going to Fergus Hanley's. And Fergus, as I said, is based in Askeaton in County Limerick. He is a weanler to beef finishing, and he approximately buys 35 wheelings every year and finishes them off. Farming organically for nearly 12 years at this stage. Before converting to organics, he again was coming from a situation where he was housing all his animals on slats. So he had a big challenge and changes to make. So we'll hand you over now to Fergus and his video.
We're here on the organic farm of Fergus Hanly in Limerick. We're standing in front of a 4-bay slatted shed with a straw lie-back. So Fergus, can you talk us through your farming system here?
So I work off farm, so I'm a part-time farmer. So what I do is I buy whalings in the autumn, October, November time, bring them straight into the shed, keep them in the shed till about, depending on the weather in the springtime, but they're usually here until March. They go out and grass in March, hopefully by Paddy's Day usually, and I keep them on grass then until the following October, and they get sold as store cattle or finished cattle, depending on how good or not they are. And they go down to the good herdsman in Care. And so that's what I do. In the evening time after I finish work, I come home here because the system, everything works in the shed. I feed silage. They usually get about, at the moment, there's just short of 30 whalings there. They get about 5 bales of silage a week, and job is usually done in about 3/4 of an hour, and it can be done in the dark. And that's good because I'll be looking forward to getting in home for my dinner. So, and that's it really. Keep it very simple. Buy whalings in November and sell them the following October, and buy them back in a couple of weeks after that bunch have been sold.
How much straw do you use, and how often do you bed the shed?
So about 2 bales of straw a week. So I bed them every evening when I'm feeding the cattle. So a bale does me about 3 days. So I break up a bale there, use a third of it every evening. You can see around there I don't fully cover the shed. We have an open area here at this side of the shed, so when the weather's coming from the east, which it doesn't often do, the straw might get a bit wet on this side. So I don't tend to put straw on this side of the shed. But 3/4 of the area is covered, third of a bale every evening, spread it out with a fork there. It's probably the slowest part of the job. So yeah, 2 bales a week, give or take, is all I use. Buy about 30 bales, a lorry load of straw. Comes up from Cork, and it usually gets me through the winter season. Usually every 4 weeks or that way, I would clean out the shed with the frontal loader and the tractor, rather than build the stuff up too much and have a big job to do at the end of the winter. So even though I give them new straw there every evening, it only gets cleaned out fully every 3 or 4 weeks.
So Fergus, how did you connect the existing shed to include the new straw lie-back?
So that wall there beside you was the back wall of the original slatted shed. So we broke out 3 4-foot gaps in the wall. The middle one is there beside us. So that's the entry point from the cattle, from the slats into the lie-back area. The pillars there were strong enough to graft on the new shed onto it. So we were lucky in that respect. We put in ventilation sheets on the far side there, so we did, and we built a fine big door there, so we had easy access with the tractor for cleaning out the shed, and so on and so forth. So it was a fairly straightforward job. There was no problem to the builders that came on site to do it. I think they had it done in about 4 to 6 weeks. As I said earlier on, there was a few other things they did while they were here around the yard, but it was easy enough for them, and thankfully, as I said, the pillars were strong enough to graft on the new shed onto.
If you were to do this project again, is there anything you would do differently?
I suppose the only thing that I might do is I might divide up the lie back area. As you can see at the moment, it's all open plan. Um, so yeah, maybe from the point of view of separating cattle, if I wanted to, I might split it in half. But it's something that I can do any time, and I might get around to doing it. It doesn't cause any problems, but that's the only thing I can think of really. Yeah.
Can you describe the costs involved in the project, and did you receive any grant aid assistance?
Okay, well, we didn't get any grant aid assistance. We built the add-on to the original slatted shed was, which is a 4-bay shed, was 25 feet deep. The overall shed is capable of holding about 70 whalens. We don't fill it to capacity. The cost of building the add-on shed back in 2018 was about, I don't have the exact figures, but I'd say around 35,000 euro. We also built on a manure pit, which is just over to the side of it there, where the shed gets cleaned out too. So about 35,000 euro did the whole lot for us. We built a crush inside in the shed as well, and did 1 or 2 other things around the yard. So I think the total cost for the overall job back in 2018 was 40,000 euro. So the shed was the most of that. So somewhere between 30 and 35,000 for the shed.
Okay, another very good story there. So maybe just to start, while Martin's looking at our question and answers, and please do keep putting them in, I might just throw open a couple of questions. Tadhg, looking at your video there, you've put a lot of thought into the changes you're going to make, and you have a very good plan in place as regards what you're going to do with your housing. Had you to do a lot of head scratching before you came up with the plan?
Yeah, I did a good bit of head scratching. What you call them? Well, the 3-bay double was easy enough because I had a dry shed close to it, so it was easy enough to link that one. Now the 4-bay single in the other yard was always a little bit drafty anyway, in stormy weather and stuff. So I always had plans to do something with it. So, when the organic thing came down, all kind of happened. It was easy enough then to decide to do the same kind of shed as Fergus, to go out the back and, expand it out that way,
Yeah, and have you an estimate of how much this is going to cost?
Well, I haven't exact figures got yet.
Yes.
But it'll be close enough to what you were talking there,
Yes,
the
yeah.
figures that Joe had there.
Yeah, and you have no problem accessing straw bedding or anything like that. You'll have no problem getting straw for your bedding.
I don't. No, I've a friend down in Newcastle West area there, and he is a straw and hay merchant, so I should have no problem getting the straw from him,
Yes. Okay, Tadhg. Maybe Joe, just moving on to you, just a question that came in here on the chat function is, can you have mats on your slats and also have your dry bedded concrete areas? So
Can you have mats on the slats?
Along
with the
yes.
Yes, you can. Yeah, there's no issue there as long as you're not depending on the mats as your lying area.
Okay.
So there's no problem there having slats on the mats, but the cattle still have to have access to a solid floor lie area.
And I suppose maybe another question is, some people worry about bringing the straw out from a solid lie area into the slats. What I know you showed an example there. Any other examples of what people are doing in relation to that?
Yeah, I suppose a lot of people would put maybe something like a 9x3 timber bolted onto the pillar, just a simple way, just stopping the cattle from pulling it in. So there is something needed there. You have to put some kind of a curb, whether it be timber or concrete or a sunken floor, because you will end up with half the straw on top of the slats if you don't do something like that. Or you look at Fergus's example there, where the wall is left mostly intact, and that's doing that job, and it'll be the same in Tadhg and Claire's example as well.
But it is very doable to stop it anyway, easily enough. Okay. Fergus, just for you, like you were coming from a situation of a slatted all housing, easy care system, and then having to convert then with your 50% lie back area. How did you find that afterwards doing it? You had to do it for organic, but in your farming system, how did you find it worked? What would your comments be on that?
Yeah, well, look at from the point of view of animal husbandry, sure they couldn't get any better. It was like a 5-star hotel for them, you know, in comparison to maybe other methods. So there's a little bit more work involved in cleaning out the shed, the solid lie-back area. But as I was saying there in the video, it doesn't take too long. As long as you stay on top of it, you do it usually about every 3 weeks. I do it on a Saturday morning there, and then a big job at the end of the year with the power hose and that. So the system works well. I mean, there's a small little corridor there where the cattle walk out to the slatted area across a creep area that I had at the back of the slat. So it prevents the straw from coming onto the slats naturally. The difficulty with a concrete curb is it might stop the water flow from coming out onto the slats from the straw area. There's a good slope on that roof, on that floor that Joe mentioned. So I'm sure there's ways around that that lads will come up with. But yeah, look, it works very well. It's fine. A little bit of extra work in terms of cleaning out, but then the rules and they have to be obeyed.
And I suppose as well as that, maybe something we might mention too, I suppose it's maybe more of a comment, but maybe for your comment on my comment is, I suppose with the straw bedding and all the rest, you have got farmyard manure. So you've got nutrients there as well to go back out on the land.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
So,
we spread that once a year or every 2 years, depending on what the build-up is. So yeah. No, most definitely, yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll hand you over to Martin, who's in charge of the question and answers. Maybe Martin, we've got a good lot of questions after coming in.
Yeah, I'm going to try and group them together here. Here's a few for you, Joe. They're all in relation to TAMS, okay? So I'll give you, they're not in any particular order, but okay, here's the first one. Given that TAMS is not yet open and will only be open for a short period and planning permission is required for a shed, is it possible or practical to have sheds built this year? That's a question.
Yes, it is. But as you see there from Tadhg, you need to be moving. You need to be getting your design drawn up. You need to be submitting your planning permission. I wouldn't be waiting for TAMS to be applying for planning permission. I'd be applying for planning permission as soon as you can. Get that moving. If you apply in the month of February, you will have planning permission by hopefully the month of May. Agricultural planning permissions typically go through fairly seamlessly in a lot of counties. So I'll probably open a can of worms there by saying that. I'm sure there is issues in some counties. But yeah, look, there is time. TAMS is, we don't know when it's going to open. We expect it'll open in the next month or two. They typically open for 3-month tranches. So if you get your planning permission moving, you should still be in time to get in an application for this tranche.
Grand. Nice simple question here. Do you qualify for the TAMS 60% grant when you're in conversion?
Yes, is the very short answer.
Okay. Another one then we have here in relation to TAMS is if you've previously used your TAMS allowance, can you claim the organic TAMS, or is it all the same TAMS cap?
It's all the same TAMS cap, but we're now moving into what's called TAMS 3. So we've had 2 rounds of TAMS. We're in a new round of cap. So in essence, the slate is wiped clean for every farmer in the country. So every farmer will start off with a new 90,000 allowance. That's what this TAMS is going to be. And every farmer has 90,000. And in an organic situation, you will get a grant of up to 60% of up to 90,000.
Lovely. And then the last one I think on TAMS, just we'll finish it, is have the department reviewed the costs for TAMS 3? We're being told it's in progress at the moment and it is being reviewed. Will it come up to actual costs? I don't know is the short answer, but we would hope that it would come some way to bridging the gap that's there at the moment. Okay, thanks, Joe. I think we'll get, there's a question here for Fergus I saw here, and where was it now? Fergus, do you have to buy organic bullocks at specific sales, or can you purchase stock from any mart?
No. So I most definitely have to buy organic stock. So I do. I think the only exception to that maybe is if in your early part of conversion. But yeah, no, absolutely. I got to buy organic from an organic source. And I do that. I have a supplier that I've bought off for the last couple of years there. I used to have a herd of suckler cows, but I changed that system. I got rid of them, and now I do the whaling to beef system. So yeah, I've had to go out and buy and source cattle from either organic marts or from one particular source, and that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years. I buried a herd of whalens off an organic man in County Tipperary.
Very good. Okay, just we saw in the video there, I'll hand this question to Joe because it's more general, but we would have seen there in the video of your farm there, Fergus, where you have your manure pit for your clean out your straw. The question here, and I'll give it to Joe, when you clean out the straw beds, are you supposed to have a manure pit, Joe?
It depends on when you're cleaning out the straw shed, I suppose, is the answer. So if you are cleaning out the shed after the land spreading date, which in Fergus and Tadhg's part of the country is the 15th of January, then you're allowed land store it or field store it, as long as it's not near a stream or is no risk of polluting any water body. So it has to be, there's certain requirements of how far it has to be kept back from streams, rivers, open drains. They all have different buffer zones. If you want to clean out the shed during the winter, then you have to have a concrete storage facility, and that concrete storage facility has to have a collection system, as you saw in Fergus's. And what Fergus has there is really the ideal scenario. That's exactly what we'd like to see in yards, and you've no worries about anyone walking into your yard if you have the same system as what Fergus has there. And again, those manure pits are eligible for TAMS grants as well, 60% TAMS grants, so it would be worth considering in most yards.
Very good. Just, I don't mean to be harboring back to TAMS, but I see Jack Nolan has just commented here from the Department of Agriculture just that, yes, there will be revisited costings when the Organic Capital Investment Scheme opens. So straight from the horse's mouth there. Another one here, technical one. Can in-conversion cattle be purchased? Do you see a shortage of organic cattle sheep this year with the increase of new farms?
Yes is the short answer to the first part of it. In conversion cattle can be purchased. So organic farmers can purchase in conversion cattle, so they can be traded between organic farmers. There is, for people this year, there is an allowance there that they can buy conventional stock only in 2023 as a kind of a temporary measure. From the 1st of January 2024, all organic farmers will have to buy either fully organic stock or in conversion stock. But there is an allowance there this year for people to buy conventional cattle as a temporary measure. So that alleviates the second part of the question, which is asking, is there going to be a shortage? So because of that, no, there won't be a shortage.
Okay. Back to Fergus. Does Fergus need or feed much meal for his system, or does he rely on good quality silage?
Yeah, just good quality silage. Is this? I might give him a small bit of organic meal just to make it easier to move them around when they go out and that, to train them to him, but they'd hardly smell it. So the stuff is expensive. So it's all good quality silage off my own farm, yeah.
Okay. A couple of technical building ones here, Joe. Can you have automatic scrapers with cubicles? And then another one is there any known material available that can be used to cover slats? So
yes, you can have automatic scrapers with cubicles. There's no issue there. The second part of that is no, really, because it's very much a safety issue. Because people can go putting concrete screeds over slats, and that's fine. But the next thing is there's a foot or a foot and a half of straw and farmyard manure on top of it. And the next thing, there's an operator with a couple of ton of a machine on top of it, cleaning it out. And the fear is that everything will end up inside in the tank. So it's purely a safety issue that a lot of these measures are not allowed, because the slat has been designed just to hold up the weight of the animal on top of it. But you're now adding in all these extras. So that is really why most of these things are not allowed, is for a safety reason. So the only solution to that query is take up the slat and put in a slab that is designed to take that weight load.
Okay. I just see one actually in relation to cubicles there. I'd say this is in relation to your presentation, Joe. Hi, was the measurement for the cubicles 7'3" by 3'11"?
No, 7'6" by 3'11".
7'6", okay.
Minimum. So it's
yeah,
quite a big cubicle.
Okay. Let's see, have we other questions coming in? Can you see a few there, Elaine? Let me see. Here's one. Practically, how far apart and how far can the sheds be separated from each other for the lie-back from the slats?
It's like it's how long is a piece of string? You have to be practical with that. Like if you're talking about 500 meters of a farmyard road between the two sheds, I don't think the organic inspector is going to buy that when they call out. So it has to be clearly visible that they can access. So I would say 10-20 meters is probably as much as you'd be pushing it in a realistic sense, with a proper fenced off connecting channel. And like there has to be visible access that the cattle are visibly able to access both sheds.
Okay. Can you have an outdoor solid lying area adjacent to the slatted shed?
You can, yeah, it is permitted. I don't know, would we be pushing it too hard from an animal welfare point of view? I think all our preference would be to see him housed inside on a straw bed would be the ideal, but it is permitted within the standards. You are probably looking at a bedding material of wood chip in that situation, but yes, it is permitted, and there are square meter allowances within the organic standards to cater for that situation.
Okay. Another one here then. Can a new shed be built as a dry shed without a slurry collection tank? And how thick the bedding should be, and how often does the bedding need to be replaced?
It can in practice be built, but really it probably is only suitable for very small numbers of animals inside in the shed. If you've large numbers of animals inside the shed, you are going to generate some element of seepage out of the shed. It's very hard with bigger numbers to control it all. So if you're down about 2, 3, 4 animals inside in a fairly big shed, yeah, you'll get away with it. But for bigger numbers, it's very hard to do it without seepage escaping from the shed. And if seepage is escaping from the shed, you have to have a mechanism of collecting it. Cleaning it out, look, it doesn't have to be cleaned out. You can leave it built up inside over the winter. And as one of the previous questions there, if you do clean it out, then you have to have a facility to be able to store it. And you have to have a mechanism of collecting the seepage from that storage facility as well. So in theory, can be done with very, very small numbers is what I would say.
Okay. Here's one. If we go organic on the farm, is the land then locked into that system? That is, if we decide to rent the place out in a few years, maybe to a dairy farmer, can organic be undone? I wonder, would it devalue the land long term? So, question and a comment, I suppose.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer that, Elaine?
Yeah, I suppose really when you enter organic conversion and you're entering the organic farming scheme, it's a 5-year commitment. So you are entering for 5 years and you undergo a 2-year conversion and then 3 years converted. So it is a 5-year contract that you are entering. So if you were to do that and you can only, let's say, you can't really decide halfway through to rent out your land, or you will have to pay back the monies that you've got for it in the scheme.
Okay.
So it's only under a force majeure situation where your payments would not be recouped, but that wouldn't be a situation which would be done.
Right. Another one here is outwintering on kale, etc., and eating silage on slats. Okay, as well for a year or two until the lie-back is built. So.
Grazing outside in kale is allowed. Again, it's with the nitrate rules and cross compliance rules. So they have to have access to a lie-back area, as in a grass lie-back area in an outdoor situation, and they have to have a sheltered site as well within the organic rules. The access to the slats for the silage is probably a dubious enough one in that the area approaching the shed, if they're going in and out of the field, you are going, no matter what you do, you are going to end up with an area that is going to be fairly well soiled, and unless you have a way of collecting that, it's in reality it's going to be hard to make that work. In theory, if they do have access, but I find it hard to see it working in reality, would be the short answer.
Okay, on a kind of similar theme here, with bullocks only, summer grazing, no indoors bar 3 or 4 weeks in March, do I require additional shedding?
No indoors bar 3 or 4 weeks in March. There is indoors, I think. So if cattle are indoors for those 3 or 4 weeks, they can't be on slats for that 3 or 4 week period. So if you have a solid floor shed, and maybe that's the situation where you get away without the tank, if it's for a short period like that, and the small numbers in it, then you might get away for a short period like that. But if cattle are in a shed for even a small period, like 3 or 4 weeks, if they're inside in the shed for a day, they need to have access to a solid line floor area. That's the short and sweet of it.
Okay. Now there are a couple of questions came in on sheep, so we'll just they're fairly straightforward ones here. Okay, so basically, is a standard 1.5 meter squared lambing pen sufficient in size?
It is, yeah. The ewe needs 1.5 square meters. So one of the conditions though is they have to be able to see, so they can't be isolated. So they have to, if there's a line of them and they can see each other, that's fine.
Yeah, and the other one on sheep here is, if sheep have access to both a field and a shed, is the farmer only allowed the amount of sheep that fit in the shed on the group?
Again, that's probably similar to the one where cattle are coming in and out and the slats and that. The
Mm.
reality there, like, would be you'd be better off to put half the sheep outside and half the sheep that fit in the shed inside, rather than having them all coming in and out. So from a practical point of view, that would probably make more sense.
Okay. This must be in relation to the design you showed in your presentation. The design shown, though, you obviously wouldn't be looking at being able to divide your cattle in batches by weight. And a second comment from the same person. So dearer to if you wanted to add this in.
I think Fergus kind of covered in his video the design, but that's one thing he'd look at doing. So yeah, you can't split that shed in two. You can make 2 groups out of animals and split them based on weight if you want to. About dearer to, I presume that's, look, sheds are expensive. They are going to cost money if you have to build one to meet the terms and conditions. Unfortunately, it's a requirement of the scheme, bar you reduce stock.
Okay, and then here's one. In a low stocked shed, why is there not a link between the number of animals in the shed and the size of the lie-back area required?
There is, I suppose, is the short answer. So if you have, like in Fergus and Claire shed there, the one on the right hand side, there was 25 square meters of a lying area. So a weanling needs 4 meters squared, of which 2 has to be lying area. So they could fit 12 weanlings in that side of the shed. So it is going to be understocked because the slatted area is much bigger than the lying area, but there is nothing wrong with understocking a shed in organics. So the 50%, sometimes it's out there that you have to have 50% of your floor area as a solid floor area. That technically that's not correct because once each animal has the lying area that it requires, you don't need that. So in that case, in Tadhg and Claire's example, the slatted area or the solid area is probably about 30% of the total area, but they're matching the numbers then to what can fit in that solid floor area.
Okay, there's several questions coming in here. I'm going to throw one back over to Fergus. I'm still looking for one for you there, Tadhg, but here's one for Fergus. Does Fergus make his own silage? I have just joined and I'm worried, how will I get the grass to grow with just farmyard manure and slurry? I wouldn't have a massive amount of each. So maybe if Fergus and maybe Joe, if you want to comment on that too. So first of all, I suppose, Fergus, you've commented before, but you make your own silage?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and lo and behold, it grows. Might take it a bit longer, but it grows. Yeah, and we usually have plenty. We never have a problem. In fact, I sometimes sell silage to organic farmers, so I'm not that heavily stocked. So I'm not. So depending on the number of stock I'm carrying, but yeah, no problem growing silage. Just takes a little bit longer.
Yeah, and just another question there, Martin, that came in was, Fergus, would you ever consider buying a straw blower?
Yeah, I don't think the operation is big enough to use one. Like, it doesn't take me that long to fork it out in the evening. And I've seen them in operation; they're a great job. But I think I'd need to be a bit bigger to justify the price of it.
And what about yourself there, Tadhg? Is there something you might look at?
Yeah, maybe we'll say maybe after a year or two we'll have we'll see how it's going.
Have a review.
Yeah, definitely.
A couple of other yes and no answers. Okay, will digestate ever be approved for organics, considering it is pasteurized? That's kind of off the topic a little, but
for the Department of Agriculture, but an
Yeah.
awful lot of it is dependent on what's going into the digester, and in a lot of cases, look, it is the likes of pig slurry and poultry manure and things like that, which are not permitted on organic farms. So it's hard to see it being allowed in the short term.
What are the terms of outdoor grazing only?
The terms of outdoor grazing are fairly straightforward. They're the same as any other organic. No chemical fertilizers, no pesticides, and you graze away as normal. There's no real issue with it. You have to meet the minimum stocking rate, which is in 2022 was 0.15 livestock unit per hectare. In 2023 it's 0.1, but the animal numbers have changed in line with it. So for the sheep farmer, it's still a ewe per hectare. So that's the main thing. If you're getting the disadvantaged dairy payment, you still have to meet that. And if you meet the disadvantaged minimum stocking rate, you'll meet the organics minimum stocking rate.
Okay. We're back to cubicles again. Can cubicles be extended onto slats by foot or 6 inches, as no machinery used to clean out cubicles? And most old slatted cubicle sheds, the cubicles are on the slats anyway.
A lot of it is down to a kind of a structural thing. If you take TAMs, you are allowed to extend 6 inches onto slats within TAMs. That is allowable. But if you go further than that, it's meant to be a precast cubicle, and it's the fear again is that you're putting more weight on the cubicle than it's designed to take. So really, I would say if you're going more than 6 inches, ideally try to get an engineer involved to spec that the slat is of structural integrity to take the extra weight.
Yeah, just two here, Joe, just in relation to TAMs again and planning permission and starting. First one is, will it be necessary to have planning permission got before you apply for the organic TAMs?
Yes, or a letter of exemption.
And another question here is in relation to somebody that if they start a shed for lie-back now and apply for a TAMs grant when it comes out.
You can't start work until you get TAMs approval. The short answer.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, back yourself there.
No, there's one there in relation. I suppose it's for the department to answer, but someone just says, I applied to join organics in October. When will I know if my application is accepted? So we might get a comment on the chat in a while, maybe from Jack. But that one's in there. So do we know when applications, if they've been accepted, when they're in?
I think what we're being told is that if they meet all the basic eligibility criteria, which is submit this application, be 18 years of age, have a valid herd number, have 3 hectares for grassland farmers, have a valid license, and there's a few other ones. If you meet those basic criteria, you're going to be accepted, is what the department are telling us, and they expect to issue letters to that effect before the end of this month, is what we're being told.
Okay.
Yeah, another one here as well, Joe, about TAMs. And if you apply for a grant and you get the grant, how long after getting the grant do you have to stay in organics?
You have to stay in organics for 5 years from the date of payment, and that's kind of an important point to notice. So if there are people that are planning on coming into organics for just the 5 years and getting out, then I would advise not to be availing of the organic TAMs. You can go for your 40% grant under the other schemes and just skip TAMs, and that might be more prudent, because if you don't attend renewing your organic contract, then there could be an issue with meeting that condition.
Yeah, that's another comment there. For example, if you go get your TAMs in year 4, that would technically mean then you'd have to stay in for another 5 years.
Yeah, it would, is the short answer. But you can't, there's nothing to stop anyone from applying from the other schemes and just foregoing the extra 10 or 20%, whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, because their housing is covered in the regular TAMs as well.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Just in relation to that question, for people to find out when they'll be accepted in the scheme, I see Jack there has commented now, all eligible applicants will receive an approval letter by the end of this month. So that's good to know. Okay. Here's one just back to, I suppose it's a little bit off topic, but we were mentioning silage and producing it on the farm. Someone wants to know, can you advise on or recommend any organic fertilizer for fields prior to making silage?
I suppose there's a number of products being kind of advertised at the moment, and some are soil conditioners and some are actually have nutrients in them in the form of NP and K. But the reality is, look, is people have gone into organics to almost get off the input treadmill And I suppose the last thing we want to see is people getting back onto that input treadmill. It's like Fergus said there, like if you put out your slurry and your manure, it will grow. It's going to grow slightly less, but it will grow. So it's a case of working as much as possible with what's within the farm gate. Try get the soil fertility moving, try get the soil biology moving, try unlock some of the nutrients that are there in the ground. And yes, that will probably mean for some people to slightly alter the stocking rates for the first number of years, but you'll find that as the soil fertility improves, you might be able to up that stock rate again then down the line.
Yeah, you mentioned soil conditioner or those type of products. I see there. Have Teagasc done any tests in relation to the use of organic approved fertilizers like super soil, etc., along with farmyard manure and slurry?
I'm not aware of any tests on
Yeah.
those specific products anyway.
What else have we here now? Can you import slurry? Nice simple question.
Yes, the short
Yeah.
answer, as long as it's from a grass-based system. So the likes of pig slurry or poultry manure from conventional poultry is not permitted, but cattle slurry is fine. Farmyard manure is fine, but it needs to undergo a further 3 months of composting. Yeah, so anything from a grass-based system is okay.
We'll try and get back on topic here now. So here's one about when do sheds and lie-back areas have to be completed by?
They have to be completed by the winter of this year, so November, if that's when your winter starts, or October of 2023, the sheds have to be in place.
Okay. Is there any more? Can you spot there?
Yeah, there's one again, TAMS again, Joe, in relation to machinery. Situation where somebody needs a tether and more and they want it this summer. Can they purchase the machinery before they get a TAMS approval?
Once you've applied for the machinery in TAMS, now this is the way the rules were in the previous TAMS, and if we go on the assumption that the rules will stay the same, once you've applied, you're allowed to place a deposit on the machine, but you're not actually allowed to get possession of the machine until you've actually got your approval in your hand.
I'm trying to keep, there's so many questions in here, folks, just trying to spot the ones that are more on topic first on housing. But it's interesting, there's big interest here in fertilizers and different types. P27 is an organic approved chemical fertilizer from Grassland Agri. So there are good fertilizers out there. So yeah, so these are more comments, and we are aware, look, there's plenty. And as Joe says, you just want to be getting back on that expensive treadmill of spending money on inputs. Certainly don't want to be going back onto that expensive treadmill of inputs. Is there an issue? Here's a completely off the topic, but is there any issue with MCPA spread in summer in 2022? The landowner had not considered going organic at that time. Okay, so anything you've done before, I suppose you've converted.
So we're on the assumption that this person signed up at the end of 2022 and started.
I'd say so.
So no, there's no issue there. That's what the 2-year conversion period is, to allow for nice products like that to get out of the system, and so that's why the 2-year conversion period is there. You can sell your product as organic for the first 2 years for exactly that reason. It's to allow those type products to leave the soil and leave the soil kind of in itself.
Yeah.
Another one, but maybe just in relation, somebody's obviously thinking about converting to organics, is about taking soil samples and completing the organic course that you mentioned, Joe, in year 1. So I suppose in relation to taking soil samples, that's part of the conversion plan to the certification body. And I think they accept up to 3 years prior to going into the scheme soil sample results. And you have time to complete the organic course. For example, this year's applicants have until the 1st of October to complete the course. So you can actually be in the scheme and you're given time to complete the course. So that's that one.
Yeah. Here's one on grant aid. Can grant aid be received on liebacks / cubicles where an internal agitation point is present in the shed and is required, as the shed is L-shaped and the point is needed to fully mix the tank? There is also no options available to make it external.
Unfortunately, the answer is no in that situation. If you have to keep the internal agitation points, then you can't. You're not eligible for TAMS grant aid.
Okay.
Just can you clarify, there are a couple of questions that come in again about importing. What is permitted as regards permitting importing slurry from non-organic cattle farms? What?
So once it's a grass-based system, so dairy farmer, your typical dairy farmer, beef farmer, that slurry is fine. Where it's not allowed is fully housed or confined system. So that's typically in this country pigs and poultry. Now you could have someone that has their dairy herd or beef herd fully confined. It's unlikely to find one, but in that situation you wouldn't be allowed to bring in that slurry. But so that's really the difference between whether they're
So zero grazing systems are not
zero
permitted.
grazing systems, exactly, yeah.
Right. Okay.
How long do farmers leave farmyard manure before spreading?
It varies from farm to farm, and I suppose it depends on what you want the farmyard manure to do. So if you're on a light sandy soil and you have tillage crops, then composting that to improve the organic matter content of your soil is probably the best use of that, and you would need to turn it numerous times to do that. But if you're on a heavy clay soil farm and the nitrogen component of the farmyard manure is more important to you, then what is typically done is just the heap of farmyard manure, like we saw in Fergus's yard, is left there and then spread at the end of the year. That equally is okay. It's providing probably more nitrogen than in the other scenario, but organic matter is probably more important in the sandy soil. So it's a case of what do you want.
Yeah, just a question for Tadhg there. Tadhg, just in relation to as regards your stock numbers and housing and wintering, have you had to cut your stock numbers, or are you going to continue with the same number of stock and be able to house them now that you're going to be farming organically?
Well, I'd say I'm going to cut my numbers a little bit starting off, because I suppose the fact that I have to, with no fertilizer, I'm probably going to be cutting a bit less silage. So I have to think of the winter as well. So I think for the first year, for the first year or two, I definitely will be cutting the numbers a bit,
Yeah.
Because for the simple fact that with less fertilizer, you're going to have less silage, you're going to have a bit less grass, So,
yeah, I think that's a very good point, that we talk about numbers of housing, but also when you're thinking about housing, it's actually what silage you're going to have, and if it's going to reduce your housing around, that's going to have an impact. Yeah, that's a very, very good point, definitely.
And of course, the fact that there'll be less feed as well, like, you know what I mean, because the feed is that bit more expensive, like the numbers will go down a little bit,
Yeah. Yes.
But it's just a matter of kind of budgeting it, play it by ear a little bit.
Yep, definitely. Martin, have we reached have you?
We're nearly there. I see just a few final ones. What's the price difference between straw and sawdust, generally speaking?
Gosh, I don't know.
I can't say what I know. We all know straw. It depends on how far away you are from the straw base. Really, is the cost of it. It's transport is what differentiate between the price of straw. And if you're in Wexford, it's going to be a lot cheaper than if you're in West Kerry. Sawdust, I have no idea the price what sawdust is costing at the moment.
Okay, and then here's one. I'm organic now a few years, and I'm coming from a conventional system. I have enough lying area. I'm interested in outdoor pads with wood chip. Are these an option? Good saving on straw. Have loads of space in the tank for rainwater. So what's your comment there, Joe?
Yeah, it is allowable within the spec, and that's the key point, is that you have to have plenty of space to collect the rainwater, and that's where often that system falls down, is that there isn't enough capacity to collect the volume of rainwater that falls. So there is, like, if you read the organic standards, cattle must have access to shelter as well. So they do need some element of shelter, whether it is going into slats to be able to eat on a wet night, that they can stand in out of the rain, but they have access back out to lie down. So there has to be some element of shelter involved as well.
Yeah, okay. Is composting of the farmyard manure better and make nutrients more accessible?
It makes some of the nutrients more accessible, like the P's and K's, and probably puts them into a more stable form, and they become more slow release. But you are possibly losing some of the nitrogen element out of it.
Okay. Here's one. Do all cattle have to be able to feed at the same time? For example, a 20 feed barrier with 30 cattle.
If you're in Fergus's situation there, where there's no meal being fed and you have plenty of silage in front of them, then no, they don't need to be able to eat all at the same time. If you're feeding meal, Yes, I suppose is the short answer. They have to be able to access a meal truck somewhere.
Right. Okay. I mean, we're getting very near the end of it now, I'd say. There's someone who wanted to know, has the meeting started? Yeah, so we're definitely getting down near the end of the questions, I think.
Is that it, Martin? Yep.
Just there's one on fodder. Can fodder be purchased from in-conversion farms?
There is, you're allowed, and I think I saw another question similar to that, you're allowed 30% of your feed as in conversion feed if you're an in conversion farmer, but you have to be careful with that 30% allowance. So it is allowed in certain situations. That's one I would definitely say is a question you should be asking your organic certification body, just to double check before you go do anything like that and run the wrong side of the rules.
Yeah, okay. What is the cost comparison between, say, slats conversion to slabs or new lieback area?
Taking out slats and putting in slabs is going to be a lot cheaper than building a new shed out the back, but you're not going to fit the same number of cattle into your shed. So if you intend putting a small number of cattle in the shed, yeah, that's the way to go. But if you want to keep the same number of cattle as you previously had, and I think you are really looking at building something out the back.
Okay. And then as regards FYM storage outside, do Teagasc have any design specs, i.e. what size concrete storage area requires what size storage tank, and if it is roofed, does that change the storage required?
There is drawings there. What's actually probably the best resource there is go to the Department of Agriculture specifications. If you even just Google Department of Agriculture building specifications, there's a whole list of them there, and there's one on manure pits, and there's actually some quite useful designs at the back of that document, and it gives all the spec and how to design channels and walls and that. So it's probably the best place to go.
Grand. I think we're kind of there. Look, there's a few there on soils. I think that's a clue for us to save it for another forum, maybe, you know, there's a good demand. So yeah, I think we'll park it there. Time is running on there, Elaine. Yeah.
Okay, everybody. First of all, on behalf of myself, Joe and Martin, I would like to say a very big thank you to Fergus, Claire and Tadhg for actually letting us into their farmyards and going through and giving us, you know, a very good, clear picture as regards what changes they're making and how to go about it. So, and for Joe then to come in and give us the practical overview. So thank you very, very much. I hope you all have a better understanding as regards animal housing. And while it may be a challenge and you might have to do a lot of maybe head scratching like the likes of Tadhg and Claire had to do, it is very, very possible. I think one of the key messages I would take with what Joe said is get the tape measure. You need to first of all find out what you have space requirement for and what you need. So those two measurements are very, very important. Also, I'd like to give a shout out for our next Let's Talk Organics webinar taking place on Wednesday, the 8th of March, and we're going to change our focus to, we're going out to the lambing shed. So we're going to look at feeding the ewe pre and post lambing in an organic situation. So again, we'll hope to have a couple of farmers in to tell us their experience and somebody to talk in about the nutrition. So until then, take care, and hopefully we're all a bit wiser after this evening. Thank you.